Hello, and welcome to More Life for Living, the Preventative Health Podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Galeazzi. I'm joined today by Dr. Rafison. Dr. Rafison, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Dr. Rafison, you sort of came on this podcast with this really impressive rap sheet that, I couldn't do justice to summarize myself. So I'd love to start by just kind of hearing a little bit about you, your background, and, your journey to where you are right now, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks. I think I'm just getting started with the rap sheet, but I am the new medical director of SimonMed Longevity. I'm a board-certified internal medicine doctor and cardiologist, and I'm excited to spearhead this project. If you want to get into a little bit of my background and why I think I'm the right person for this, is because I've been interested in preventive medicine for a very long time. Over 15 years probably, before it was cool, before there was the term longevity being thrown around by celebrities. I always knew from before I applied to med school that our healthcare systems could probably be doing a better job. And I think everyone has that intuition. So I knew that once I started pursuing a career in medicine, and have always had like a wide angle lens view just of the world. In college, I studied both the microscopic and macroscopic levels of life, of biology, studying molecular biology and also ecology. I went on to study public health and focused on epidemiology, which is really the science of research, also with a deep interest in bioethics and health law, and then on to medical school, where at that point, I knew I was really passionate about preventive medicine in general and population medicine and just kind of improving how we as a society do healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I learned very quickly that cardiology was the field to be in, because cardiovascular disease is by far and away the number one cause of death and illness. And it's estimated that 80% of all of that is preventable. Wow. So the best bang for your buck if you want to be a preventive medicine doctor. Yeah. Since then, longevity has become the term kind of all-encompassing for what healthcare can do better.
I think you're the first one we've had on here that longevity is actually in your title, which is very cool. And we'll get into that a little more in a moment. Should. But real quick, I love to sort of double click on terms so that folks at home can make sure that everyone's on the same page. But when you say preventative medicine, what is that? Let's define that real quick.
Great question. And we should also define what longevity is, or try to. Yeah. Preventive medicine, it's simply preventing preventable diseases. I know that sounds rhetorical, but not trying to be sarcastic. A lot of diseases you can catch early and either completely prevent them from happening or prevent them from doing permanent damage, alter the course, and prevent unnecessary suffering.
Yeah. So taking a more proactive approach versus waiting until there's already symptoms and things are too late. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Okay. Symptoms are often a late stage finding of a disease process.
Yeah. So then how does that compare with, I think you just said, defining longevity? Is that synonymous? Is there a little bit of a differentiation? Because that's a buzzword in some places. So let's pin down our version of it.
I used to call it the L word. That's a much deeper can of worms. And I think we as a society actually need to decide I don't think we have. You ask a million people what longevity is or longevity medicine is, and you'll get a million different answers. I think we do need to decide what it means. In my mind, just one person, but I kind of have started to draw a line between longevity medicine and biohacking. And that might be a whole topic of conversation on its own.
Feels like a whole episode we could do together.
Probably. But longevity it's an imperfect term, I think. Frankly, the whole setting is there should be no adjective for this. It shouldn't be longevity medicine. It shouldn't be preventive medicine. It should just be really good healthcare. Yeah, that's what it is in my mind. That's what I'm striving to do always. Is what are the best tools we have today to achieve what people want from healthcare, which is to live long, prosperous, healthy lives as much as they can.
That's a really powerful way to put it. I like that. You said something else that was very interesting, just that you are a cardiologist, correct?
That's right.
So talk to me a little bit about the intersection between, what brings a cardiologist to this focus on longevity and preventative medicine? Because as we were getting to know each other before the recording, you mentioned that it's kind of this perfect intersection, and I'd love to know a little bit more about why that is.
Part of the longevity biohacking conversation, I think, is what can you add to your life to make you healthier or live longer? And I think that's really not the first question. I think that's skipping steps. The first question should be, and really the most powerful thing anyone can do, the lowest hanging fruit for whatever you want to call longevity, living longer, health span, lifespan, all of it. The number one thing you could do is what I was addressing earlier. The number one thing that causes death and illness is cardiovascular disease. So the number one thing you should do if you want to increase your odds of living long and healthy is to avoid preventable cardiovascular disease as much as possible.
Well, to someone who doesn't have, obviously, the education that you do, that sounds pretty reasonable, and that sounds pretty logical. So
it's getting easier and easier these days.
Yeah.
That's I think, the real message. People think it's this impossibility or this unattainable thing, or that you have to, have your own medical center in your house and
Right.
and $1 million a year of investment to do these things. It's not true.
Right.
The truth is that we can actually do this fairly well now,
Yeah.
if you have the right guidance.
Yeah, you don't need to be a Brian Johnson or someone incredibly wealthy or a Hollywood actor or something, right?
I think you used to have to be, which is, so that's the nuance here, that 5-10 years ago, to get the kind of care that people can get today, 5-10 years ago, you did have to be elite. You had to seek out really early adopters of things, find the best doctors who were expensive, or there was a little bit of risk involved because things were not as well defined or unknown. Technology clearly wasn't what it was 5 years ago. So to get the level of care today in preventive medicine, 5 years ago, it was really hard, but not anymore. Today, it's attainable.
No, it's an exciting development. We've seen a lot of that, and especially that's a lot of what we're trying to talk about here on the More Life for Living podcast. So
Yeah.
excited to dive in a little bit more. So Dr. Rafison, you said something interesting earlier that kind of, brought my TikTok feed to mind, which was, biohacking, right? And I'm sure everyone is familiar with the influencers in the biohacking space, but you spoke about that as if it's kind of separate from longevity. And I'd love to hear more about that too, because that feels like an important distinction.
Yeah, I think we have to have an honest conversation about this because there are longevity centers popping up everywhere now, and it's very confusing to people because they use the same term. And if you go to their website and you see what they offer, some of them only offer what we can define as just for now, as biohacking interventions. And then some offer vastly different options, such as what we're focusing on at SimonMed Longevity. So what is biohacking? In my mind, it's very interesting. I kind of alluded to it earlier. When I was younger, I had this intuition that healthcare could be doing better. And I wasn't the only one with that intuition. I think we all have that now. Yeah. In general, people are very skeptical. Nothing is perfect. Science is imperfect. People have difficult experiences with health insurance, with hospitals, with having time with their physician. It goes on and on. And I think what biohacking is it's interesting, and I don't mean to belittle it, but what's interesting about it is people have shied away from traditional medicine and pharma, big pharma, and because of its capitalist tendencies, and there's this sentiment that the healthcare economy is not prioritizing people's health, it's prioritizing profit over people.
Right.
And to a certain degree, that's true, but I don't think it's as nefarious. We could talk about that. But on the other front, what's interesting to me is that now there's this entirely separate industry that is basically doing the exact same thing, which is saying, take as many of our pills as possible. Don't ask questions, just if we have a cure for what ails you, and it's still an economy on taking more and more and more, except it's completely unregulated.
Right.
No one has any idea really of what they're taking or if it's going to actually have the effect that they mean to have. It's also not as simple as that. It's a very noisy space. There's probably some good things in that world that will be proven to be effective, but in general, I think that there's this industry preying on people's mistrust of traditional medicine. Sure. And telling them to turn their attention and their dollars to a completely different industry that's really ultimately doing the same thing, which is trying to get people to take as many exogenous things as possible. I tend to believe that health is really from within, and that we need to protect our body's innate ability to be healthy. So to me, the distinction is longevity medicine are tried and true, not necessarily guidelines driven, but tried and true methods for preventing disease, improving life, reducing suffering, versus biohacking, which is still kind of the Wild West. And you have to be a little bit more discerning, because at the end of the day, if you go to a doctor or you get a surgery or you take a medication and something goes wrong, there's liability. In the biohacking world, these millions of things that you could do, from hyperbaric oxygen to any of the additional supplements or peptides, if something goes wrong, there's no liability because they never promised you a result.
That's true.
So to me, it's actually a pretty clear line where there's a difference between the two.
Yeah. That's a really important way to remember it, actually, thinking about, all the conversations you see online right now, right? It's kind of the new trust me, bro mindset. As
a society, we have become vigilant to traditional and let's call it legacy healthcare. We should be just as discerning with the other industry. And for some reason, a lot of people aren't. And that's a little concerning.
Yeah. So another in the lead into our interview here, you mentioned something in our conversation that was a whole body approach, right? And I really liked the way that you put that. But what does that mean clinically?
So I just want to be clear that whole body healthcare is distinct from like a whole body MRI.
Right. You're talking about the full picture of your body's health.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we need to remember that the body and mind are one thing. We're one entity, and nothing works in isolation.
Right.
No part of the body works in isolation, and also no disease, most chronic disease that we're talking about, does not affect a single organ at a time.
Sure.
So cardiovascular disease. People don't have isolated cardiovascular disease or isolated heart disease. By the time you're needing a cardiologist because you're having heart problems, your whole body has been affected. You don't just have the one major organ keeping you alive having issues in isolation.
Right.
So if by the time you have heart disease, there's been a lot of damage that's been done to the entire body, to the point where you're noticing, by the time your check engine light goes on, you've missed a few services. So the whole body approach to healthcare is remembering that nothing is in isolation. So the diagnostic process should encompass as many parts of the body as possible, and so should the treatment options.
When you say so should the treatment options, right, you mean versus going to one specialist and then another and then, something like that, where the current system sort of fragments that care? Or double click on that a little bit for me. Like how could one hear that and go, oh, I'm going to now take that approach?
So before I get into the treatment options, let me expand upon the diagnostics options as well.
Sure. Yeah, please. Let's
So
start
when
there.
you're talking about preventive medicine, the name of the game is early detection and prevention.
Sure.
So the early detection is the diagnostic part, and then prevention is what you actually do, the intervention. When you're talking about early disease, detecting disease early as possible is the better. The earlier, the better.
Sure.
But the earlier, the harder it is really to detect. So it's really easy to detect someone having a heart attack.
Of course.
They're on the floor having a heart attack.
Right.
But detecting the disease process that leads to a heart attack currently is more challenging. It requires a bigger effort on our part. So in order to accurately diagnose, determine if you're having early disease, you have to look for it anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
So if the cardiovascular disease that's killing the most people is happening to the whole body, you could really kind of look anywhere in the body to look for it. And any first sight of it should give you an idea that something is going on that can be preventable.
Yeah.
So that's why the diagnostic process can also be a whole body approach. For example, for cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome that leads to these catastrophic things like heart failure, heart attack, stroke, metabolic disease doesn't only affect the heart, it affects the heart, the 60,000 miles of blood vessels attached to the heart. You can find it in the liver, you can find it in the brain, you can find it in the back of the eye. So looking for it anywhere and everywhere will help you be more certain of what you're dealing with. And then the treatment approach to the whole body, when you're dealing with this singular kind of 500-pound gorilla in the room, metabolic syndrome, before there's permanent damage to any individual organ, then yeah, you probably don't need a team of specialists.
Right.
You need really good guidance on lifestyle modification, and when you're treating disease early, you don't need as many medications, 1 or 2 maybe, but most of the effect will be lifestyle modification, and if it's necessary, a couple medications only that a really good physician who understands this process can help you with. So we can touch a little bit on why we are where we're at in healthcare.
Sure. Let's go into that for a minute then. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about preventive medicine. We can call it longevity medicine, and how really I think it's technological advancements that are allowing this new revolution in healthcare. So why people always ask, how come it isn't like this already? You know, when I talk about the way I practice medicine, almost very often I'll hear the same response from people. Oh, this is the way healthcare should be. So that implies, why isn't it this way?
Right.
And not to get too esoteric on this, but the current healthcare system and industry is the most optimal version of something that was designed 100 plus years ago.
Right.
So before we had X-ray technology, let alone MRI, blood tests, we had microscopes and stethoscopes and our hands and eyes and ears and mouths to diagnose things. The model for healthcare was a person, a patient, anybody, they realize they're having a problem, a symptom. Okay, I have problems, go to a doctor.
Right.
Doctors were the whole elaborate, beautiful profession of being a physician was designed around someone coming to you with problems.
Right.
And we took that model and perfected it to the nth degree. We have, especially in the US, we have the best possible version of that type of healthcare that you could imagine. But really, it's kind of like having a horse and carriage that's been tricked out, rather than
That's how it feels sometimes.
building something from scratch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I try to do with the way I practice medicine, and I think what we're doing with SimonMed Longevity is building something from first principles, from the ground up, so that if an alien came to Earth and had no knowledge of history, there was no legacy, and looked at all the technology we currently have, how would you design healthcare? I don't want to call it preventive medicine. I don't want to call it longevity medicine. let's just call it healthcare.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're building.
Yeah.
We're building a system where we're addressing the number one, two, three, four causes of death and illness, and deploying the best modalities that are effective, trustworthy, reliable, and efficient to deal with the problem at hand, which is not really people having infections or even accidents. I mean, again, the top few causes of death and illness are caused by chronic disease and cancer that is able to be found with early detection, and either completely preventable, or you can mitigate the harm and mitigate the suffering at least.
Yeah. So I think I really like your metaphor there, the tricked out horse and buggy. I think it feels like we're finally due to upgrade to a car.
Yeah.
Right?
Or flying car.
Yeah, or flying car, even better. If we can jump right to flying car, that would be great. So speaking of, this transition to this new approach and everything like that, right? That's kind of, I think, from a really insightful perspective on how the industry is evolving. But in your eyes, how should the consumer or patient's mindset evolve with this as well, right? Like, what I mean by that is, what is the right time to start thinking about your longevity?
That's a great question. And it's actually fairly straightforward to answer. So if we're talking about with longevity medicine, meaning preventing unnecessary diseases and suffering, which will in turn improve your health span and lifespan, the question is, when do those diseases begin? The major things we're talking about. And that's when you can start looking for it. That's when you should start thinking about it. And for the cardiovascular disease that is affecting the vast majority of people, not everyone, but a lot of people, it actually begins early in life, in your 20s and 30s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So in your 20s and 30s, and this is now really guideline recommended. Back to what we were saying before about 5-10 years ago, having this kind of mentality was a little bit more extreme, or you were more of an outlier to think about things like this. But today, the new guidelines for cardiovascular disease are defining risk for people in their 30s, starting in their 30s, because the disease process takes decades. So if someone is having a heart attack in their 50s, the disease process likely began in their 20s or 30s or 40s. No one has a surprise heart attack out of nowhere.
Right.
The disease process had begun for likely decades before that. And what's wonky about the current system is that that person likely has seen several doctors along the way, being told that they were fine, everything looks good. Boom, I'm having a heart attack. I remember in the hospital wheeling people to the cath lab as a cardiology fellow, 2 a.m, it's 5 a.m, people clutching their chest saying, but I saw my doctor 6 months ago, they said everything was fine. And I heard that story over and over and over again. And to the point where Americans are having heart attacks almost like once a minute. Small, large heart attacks, doesn't matter, but it's happening so frequently. So why is something that's so obvious, if you were to make a bet, this would be the easiest bet you could make, that anyone, if I could make a bet that anyone here, how you would die, I would say probably from cardiovascular disease.
Jeez.
And it's an easy bet.
Yeah.
People make bets on way worse odds. And the system hasn't fully, and it's getting better. It's being driven by visionaries in the field. But why don't we have a better system to deal with this? And I think that's on the horizon. I think we're going to have very rapidly a much better systemic way for early diagnosis of cardiovascular disease, and then the prevention that comes with it.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see that narrative become more commonplace nowadays. So it's exciting to get to talk to folks like yourself that are at the forefront of that. Yeah,
I think that's really what's exciting about what we're doing here at SimonMed Longevity, is that we have the ability to deploy a lot of these necessary changes through our enterprise, until hopefully very soon this becomes the standard of care, we have a unique opportunity to save a lot of people's lives, whether it's preventing catastrophic heart attacks, or really what's become more common these days is preventing the slow damage to the cardiovascular system that results in extended years of suffering.
Yeah.
So just to touch on the difference between health span and longevity, what's interesting, and maybe the real main kind of misnomer for longevity is not necessarily the biohacking stuff. That's fine. But what's interesting is that humans have been continually living longer.
Yeah.
So then people will say, but why are you interested in longevity? All you need to do is look at epidemiology of human lifespan. It keeps getting longer and longer and longer in general. What's happening is the number of years living diseased is increasing.
Right. That end of life window where folks are really dealing with a lot is what you mean by that, right?
Not end of life.
Okay.
We're talking about many years. The number of years people are living with disease is growing,
I see.
even as the lifespan is kind of plateauing.
I see. Okay.
So we're actually going in the wrong direction in terms of health span.
Interesting. Okay.
At least in the U.S. Our lifespan is plateauing, still pretty high, over 70 years old, much longer than ever before. But what we're witnessing now is actually there's a growing disparity between health span and lifespan. So maybe longevity isn't the right word, but really the focus is preventing unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
So if you can prevent years of diseased living, morbidity, then you're improving someone's life. And I think the obvious thing that most people agree on is that they would rather live a healthy life than a long life.
Okay, so a common theme when having these conversations that I find fascinating is I find myself leaving these interviews going, okay, where do I start? Like, where do I begin now? Right. So I think for the listeners at home, what would your advice be for someone who now wants to go be proactive for their longevity? What are some free options that someone can be proactive about their longevity?
When we're talking about longevity, we're talking really about how humans just interact with our environments. So if chronic disease is preventable, a lot of chronic disease, that means there's things you can do to avoid it. A lot of times you need medication or some serious medical interventions, but a lot of times you don't, at least to improve your situation. Just harping on cardiovascular disease, we'll separate out the major causes of death and illness. So cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurocognitive decline. And then after that, it's car accidents and I think gunshot wounds. And then I don't even know what comes after that. And cardiovascular disease kills by far more Americans, men and women, than all cancers combined.
Wow. All cancers combined.
Yeah,
That's
for men
crazy.
and women.
Wow.
So really, cardiovascular disease it's where I would put my money on.
Okay.
On what I would want to avoid.
Sure. So where do you begin with that then, in your opinion?
So reverse engineering the disease process, but we don't know all the things that cause it. Mm-hmm. I think that anyone who's trying to tell you that it's this one thing, this one blood biomarker, or this one toxin, or whatever it might be, it's not one thing.
Right.
Nothing has a one-to-one correlation in the body. We have to be humble to know that there's actually probably more that we don't know than what we do know about the human body. It's not going to be do this one thing and you'll never have a heart attack,
right,
or take this one pill, or whatever it is.
I can see the clickbait on my feed as you're saying that.
Yeah,
noticed some that claim that sort of thing. Yeah.
Buy this and you'll live forever.
Right.
I mean, can you believe that we're still living in a world where people try to do that?
Yeah. I know. It's crazy.
We make fun of these old timey Wild West things, the snake oil.
Yeah.
The exact same marketing still exists today.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
you're absolutely right.
For example, when when someone wants to, if I have a patient who is coming to me because they have cardiovascular disease or they want to prevent it, I will use the best medical diagnostics I could possibly attain to diagnose, find the cardiovascular disease process wherever I can. At the end of the day, the treatment options for this are fairly limited from what I can provide. Mm-hmm. What people can do for free are the most mundane things that we take for granted in society the most. Exercise, sleep, hydration, mental wellness. Lack of those obvious things we know are correlated to disease. Yeah. So being more active, sleeping better, and eating better, we do know that those improve your cardiovascular fitness. For example, physical fitness. There's a lot of research on how physical fitness relates to your cardiovascular health and your longevity. VO2 max is a marker of your cardiopulmonary fitness, and it tracks very well with like mortality. Mm-hmm. So basically, the longer you're able to run, the longer you're going to live. That's a great thing to know. But what people really should be thinking about, because most of us are not marathon runners, we wouldn't be suffering as a society if people were worried about their VO2 max. There's a few people that everybody knows who has elite VO2 max, but this is clearly not everybody. Right. We wouldn't be in this situation as a society. What people don't talk about enough is the greatest improvement, one of the greatest improvements someone can have in their health is not from a medication. If you're someone who is inactive and you become active, just the simple transition from being an inactive person to becoming a more physically active person is one of the single most effective, powerful improvements and interventions someone can have for their health.
Really?
Being an inactive person is basically equivalent to being a smoker.
Wow.
So people who are inactive, don't walk, don't exercise, go about their day, work hard, have a normal life, but aren't even walking or going to the gym or anything like that. You don't have to go from being an inactive person to becoming an elite athlete. All you have to do is transition from being inactive to becoming active, whatever it takes. Anything is better than nothing. Yeah. That is the greatest leap, better than most medications. So it's equivalent to being a smoker and quitting smoking, almost.
Wow.
But yeah, being inactive is effectively as risky to your cardiovascular health as being a smoker. Being active is incredible.
Yeah.
Everyone should do it. We evolved from apes to walk upright on two legs. That is our natural biologic mode of transportation, and it's actually a driver of health. If you're not walking, at least think of yourself as being as risky with your health as being a smoker.
Wow.
So number one thing for anyone is put down your phone, turn off the TV, delete TikTok, go for a long walk. Nutrition is also very easy. It doesn't mean you have to supplement with expensive vitamins or drink smoothies fortified with algae. It just means whole food diet and minimizing processed food and avoiding refined sugar as much as you possibly can. So whole foods, minimizing processed food, avoiding refined sugar.
Those sound like the closest thing to this quote unquote magic pill that we see, sort of get talked about than anything I've heard of.
This is the magic pill.
This is the magic pill.
Go for a walk.
Simple choices.
Make easy changes to your diet. And actually those things in turn will help you sleep better, which is the other thing I was going to say. So the things that we take for granted the most, again, exercise, physical fitness, not even exercise, just physical activity.
Yeah.
What you eat, how much you're sleeping, how well you're sleeping, and your mental well-being, all of those things are tied together and they affect this entire process of cardiovascular disease. there's a lot of things that are out of our hands. There's genetics, there's pollutants, there's toxins that we don't know about. There's so many things that are out of our hands. So I want to be careful not to put all the onus on people. It's not 100% preventable by lifestyle, but certainly it's part of the equation and a big part of the equation.
It sounds like a big part of the equation, though.
Yeah.
Right. Is that, if we could at least be doing that, we'll close that gap between the uncontrollables and what we have the ability to take initiative over in our own lives.
And you don't need fancy diagnostics for this. You don't need to be prescribed anything. These are just simple things that we have basically forgotten as a society, but science has proven them to be effective over and over and over again. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense and is honestly a lot more free and obtainable than I was kind of thinking you might say. That's great.
It's not sexy enough to sell, but it should be. It is those simple things.
Yeah, but it's important enough to remember that it doesn't need to be sexy to be efficient or effective in what the objective is, right? Yeah. Sometimes the least sexy option can be the most impactful, right?
Yeah, in this case, it very well is. In this case, and this touches on one of the questions you asked earlier about when do you begin thinking about this?
Yeah.
If you start living an unhealthy life in your 20s, that begins the trajectory of cardiovascular disease. Sure. So in your 20s and 30s is really when you should start thinking about it. And what I always talk to people about is this shouldn't be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. This shouldn't be something that overtakes your life. These are simple changes that should be really subconscious how you live your life. Yeah. This isn't something where, again, to be physically active does not mean you need to go from being inactive to a jiu-jitsu master. It just means go for a walk, do some push-ups, whatever you can do. It's better than nothing. Same with diet. Every little thing matters. Eating a little bit less in general for some people, or avoiding that a little bit less sugar every day, it does make a difference. And we know it. There's a dose response curve for these things.
Interesting. Yeah. That was really helpful, really powerful. And, probably the most motivated I've been to go to the gym in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Free.
Actually, I kind of want to take a step back again, if you wouldn't mind, and define one more term. We've talked about cardiovascular, whether it's disease or health in one phrase or another. Let's define that, because I feel like some folks, when they hear cardiovascular, they think, go do cardio or something like that. So what does that mean in the context we've been discussing it?
The cardiovascular system is involved in every single part of your body. Mm-hmm. So the heart is one of the most, if not the most interesting, beautiful organ. I might be biased. Its job primarily is to pump blood. How does it do that? It's not just the heart. It's 60,000 miles of blood vessels attached to the heart. From the large blood vessels that you can see with your naked eye to microscopic capillaries that really are the vast majority of those 60,000 miles are the capillaries. And those capillaries are in every part of your body. They're in your skin, they're in your brain, they're in your kidneys, they're in your liver, everywhere. Mm-hmm. So remembering, and why I keep saying remembering is because I think even cardiologists sometimes, or in the training, we don't emphasize enough the entire cardiovascular system. We know about it, we know there's capillaries, but because there aren't currently a lot of effective medicines that target this specifically, the capillaries, then we tend to ignore it. We tend to focus on what we know there's a treatment for. Mm-hmm. So the cardiovascular system, and I think this is really the future of longevity medicine in a lot of ways, is knowing that the heart and the entire vascular system, the arteries and the veins and the capillaries particularly, that's where the damage actually really begins. The capillaries that are in your heart muscle or in your brain, those are the most delicate. So if you pull out plant and you see the roots, there's the big roots right attached to the branches, to the trunk, But then there's little tiny hairs. They look like the smallest ones. Same thing in the body. And those are the most vulnerable. Those are single cell thick sometimes. And the disease process caused by inflammation, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, that's where the disease process that we're talking about, cardiovascular disease, that's where it begins. You start destroying, damaging the capillaries in the heart, in the brain, in the eye, in the kidneys, in the liver, wherever, in the gut. So being a very discerning cardiovascular disease physician means remembering that it's the heart and all the blood vessels attached to it.
Yeah.
And if we're vigilant about cardiovascular disease, at least the chronic cardiovascular disease that we're talking about here, you have to remember that the disease process begins there. And that's why we are reliant on advances in technology, because these are microscopic. You can't see it from the outside. You can't see it from your eye. And really, we're relying nowadays on emerging technologies with AI enhancement to start understanding and finding the beginning of the disease process at the capillary level. We can't be so hard on ourselves that we didn't know this before or didn't focus on it before, because the medicine is getting better. We're starting to be able to find this disease process early enough at the beginning of the process, really at the capillary level, the endothelial level, and finding it that early gives you your best chance of health span and lifespan. The earlier you prevent something, the less harm it's going to cause in your daily life, and the lower the risk it's going to cause some catastrophic event that's going to kill you suddenly.
Okay, one more definition request, because I heard something I didn't know what it meant, which is endothelial.
Endothelium.
Thelium. Okay, so I wasn't even close, but endothelium.
I try not to use medical terms because it doesn't help people. But
that's okay. That's why we define it, right?
This touches on why experts are still needed, and AI, and that whole conversation about technology and do you need an expert, and
Another episode.
I think as AI gets better and so much more medicine can be performed by machines, the job of physicians really becomes to not make the mistake I just made, which is be expert communicators. I had to go to school for 20 years to understand what the computer might diagnose, but to interpret that and convey it to you is really my job, especially when it comes down to preventive medicine, where the effect that I want to have is for you to change your own life. It's not anesthetize you, cut you open and take something out, right? You either have to voluntarily take the medication yourself, go for a walk, eat better. So the messaging is really important.
Sure.
Okay.
No, I think that's a really critical point.
Endothelium.
I actually respect that. Yeah, no, that's important. I don't want to brush past that. I think that's a really important point.
Endothelium is, so if you have 60,000 miles of blood vessels, the inner lining of the blood vessels is, of the tubes, the pipes, there's an inner lining which is one cell thick.
Okay.
And that's really the barrier between your blood vessel and the blood that's going through it.
Interesting.
And so damage to that single thin layer of saran wrap that's kind of coating the inside of the blood vessels, the inside of the tubes. Damage to that is what ultimately allows atherosclerosis to begin.
Interesting.
You should probably define what that means too.
I was about to say, it's like you beat me to it. I was going to say, I'm going to ask you one last time. Let's define that one too.
It's the word. Okay. This is the word of the hour. But it's really, when people talk about plaque or blockages, this is what they're talking about.
Okay.
Atherosclerosis. So it's the buildup of unwanted stuff inside of the blood vessels that leads to disruption of the blood flow, disruption of clean laminar blood flow, nice and smooth blood flow throughout all the vessels, not just through the heart, in the brain, in the kidneys, wherever. Disruption of that, not good.
Okay.
And in case of heart attacks is when those atheromatous plaques, these lesions, these unwanted buildup of material, think of it like a pimple inside of your blood vessel.
Okay.
So when there's enough inflammation and enough buildup, that pimple can pop. What happens when a pimple pops? It bleeds. What happens when you have bleeding? You have a scab formation. Now, when you have that process inside of a blood vessel,
Right.
and you have a scab forming inside, you kind of block the blood flow.
Yeah,
and it can happen abruptly. Imagine if you just immediately clog the pipes in your sink, all of a sudden you get backflow. The atheromas, these lesions, these plaque buildups, if they happen in your heart, in the blood vessels that feed the heart, that rupture, that popping of the pimple leads to a heart attack. So that means a part of the heart that was supposed to be receiving blood immediately stops receiving blood. That's what a heart attack is. The same exact process can happen in blood vessels of the brain, and that's what causes an ischemic stroke. So heart attack, brain attack, same thing.
All
they just have different words. Yeah.
Interesting.
And
okay.
this is one of the things that really I've been saying for a long time. Can you believe that more people know about astrology, not astronomy, astrology, than this simple clogging of the pipes?
I think that's probably a little bit more important than your sign compatibility.
I mean, that's important too. But in our society, we live in a world where I just described a very simple thing that a 5-year-old can understand.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that this is the number one thing that they're really afraid of, heart attack or stroke. What is it? It's that.
That does feel like a very glaring gap.
I was always so confused. Why did I have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to medical school to learn what that is?
Yeah. Well, the worst part is that even with the analogy with the pipe, it's like we kind of do learn it, but for our homes and our houses, we don't learn about it for our bodies.
I'm not worried about job security if someone else figures out what a heart attack is.
Sure.
What's a heart attack? I mean, no, but people don't know. It's wild to me. It's wild to me that people in our society where you have kids playing with AI and teenagers starting businesses on their computer at home in their mom's basement. And we as a society have not decided that people should know how their own bodies work.
Yeah.
A lot of what I am passionate about in my field as a cardiologist, as a preventive medicine physician, as a longevity doctor, at the end of the day, back to what your question was, is really a lot of this has to do with communicating effectively to our patients so that they understand and learn how their own body works. Simple understanding of how the disease process works so that then they can make the lifestyle changes that they can make, but know why they're making them.
Yeah.
And that is part of, I think, longevity medicine, is empowering patients to make the decisions that will avoid unnecessary disease and suffering.
Yeah.
That's a big part of what we're building, I think, at SimonMed Longevity, is not only doing the diagnostics and not only guiding people to the therapeutics, but also empowering people to understand what the diagnostics showed, what the therapeutics are, and giving them really good, sound, reliable recommendations on lifestyle modification.
Dr. Rafison, I've had a great conversation with you here today, and we're coming up on time here, so I want to bring it back to what we opened with, which is talking about more of the accessibility to a more preventative approach to healthcare. Talk to me a little bit more about just, what are some of the ways that we're trying to make this more accessible? What are some of the ways that, people can expect to see coming now that will make this more part of their day-to-day life, where they don't have to, have the trainer from the movies and, things like that?
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting change that's coming in healthcare, is that this level of really effective longevity medicine, so increasing health span and lifespan, is becoming so much more accessible. And it's really it's a age-old story of technology advancing to the point where it becomes ubiquitous. And I think we're at a time in every sector of society where technology is revolutionizing what we're able to do. The difference here is that Dr. John Simon and SimonMed and SimonMed Longevity, and my passion as well, is to be the early adopters of the most effective and reliable technologies out there and make them available to as many people as possible. So healthcare is famous for having a very long lag time between research and that research being deployed to the public. There's a average of 10 to 15 years about of where there's a scientific discovery to the point where it reaches the patient.
Wow.
With how rapidly technology is advancing today, that is an unacceptable amount of time. And the industry, the healthcare industry, can't keep up because the industry needs to be regulated by the government, institutionalized, medical students need to be taught the next thing, et cetera. So that long lead time, which is great, it keeps things safe generally. It seems so much longer than ever before because of the rate of acceleration of technological advances.
Yeah.
So we're lucky that we have the right mindset, the right leadership to be early adopters of these new technologies that can profoundly change someone's life and the ability to deploy it to as many people as possible quickly. And we're talking about things that are not experimental surgeries or medications. A lot of this is early diagnosis and then prevention, which we talked about. There's a handful of medications really that are very effective when you're treating disease early. And then a lot of it is empowerment to make the right free lifestyle changes.
Right, yeah.
So I think the quote unquote democratization of preventive medicine or longevity medicine is here. And we really want to usher that in as quickly as we can, as safely as we can, as effectively as we can, and as really as affordable as we can as well. And it will save lives. We want to change how society thinks about healthcare. And I think you're going to see more and more and more how basically the private sector is going to be determining how people view healthcare.
Yeah.
And the healthcare industry will catch up, but it moves slowly, for better or worse, but it will catch up. Just in the last few years, a lot of the things that were in the kind of longevity space, let's say, some blood tests that used to be ordered in the longevity space are now becoming standard of care, or at least are being brought into the guidelines. There's a lot of hype about Lp(a), ApoB, calcium score, CT angiography of the coronaries, things that 5-10 years ago, to get that level of care, you had to go out of pocket. You had to find someone who was willing to order these things for you when there was less evidence about their efficacy. And it was expensive to do it that way. Technology and also our knowledge, the studies are coming out that are showing that some of these things that 5-10 years ago were expensive and rare are just now less expensive and less rare and effective. And I think we'll continue to see that. So not to be disparaging about the biohacking world, I think there'll probably be some signal in the noise there. Yeah. And I'm very vigilant and very curious and have a watchful eye on what is effective as these things get studied more and more and more. Because what you don't want to be is just a skeptic and ignore everything that hasn't been already scientifically proven. That doesn't make you a scientist.
Sure.
That makes you a technician. So you have to know that there's probably stuff on the horizon.
Yeah.
There's definitely stuff on the horizon. And I think the difference here is that, okay, who or what entity is doing that avant-garde work for you? Is it someone you trust who wants to help you? Or is it someone who is trying to make a quick buck?
Yeah. I think it's a very important question, especially given, how many folks are getting their sources from all sorts of different places now.
There's clearly a demand for this, and people know that. Americans are spending so much on the kind of biohacking stuff, billions of dollars. People want to spend their hard-earned money on their own health.
Yeah.
They don't need to be tricked into spending money on their health. They want to spend their money on health. What is not clear is where you should be spending that money and what's a reliable intervention or diagnostic process. And people will overdiagnose or overtest, overtreat, undertreat. So as we learn as a society what true longevity medicine is, what preventive medicine can be, what good healthcare is, because this is all so new. As we learn what's effective, what's not, really it's about proof.
Yeah.
Does this actually work? Can I rely on it? The more people learn about that, I think it'll be an easier decision for people to make where to spend their hard-earned dollars until insurance catches up.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Rafison, again, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation, and I don't say that lightly. There have been so many things I've walked away from this learning, and I'm sure our viewers at home have as well. I look forward to having you back because I hate to break it to you, but we're going to try to have you back quite a bit on here. So I look forward to chatting more with you.
It was fun. Many more rants to go on.
Absolutely. As always, thank you so much for watching or listening to the More Life for Living podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Engagement of all forms helps us grow and reach more audiences where we can help bring information to you to be an informed advocate for your own health to help you live a better, longer life. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.